It was 5:30 in the morning, and my eyes opened on their own, long before the alarm was set to go off. My 58-year-old body was like a precise old machine. In the darkness, I fumbled for the faded work shirt I always wore. My fingers brushed against the patch on the right shoulder, and I paused. Julian had torn it back in middle school, and I couldn't bear to throw it away, so I had patched it up, stitch by stitch. "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to buy you 100 new shirts." His young, earnest voice still seemed to echo in my ears. I quietly washed up and grabbed the steel hook and a few woven polypropylene sacks that hung by the door. The September morning air already had a chill to it, that early Chicago bite. I pulled the collar of my jacket tighter and pushed the old pushcart that had been my companion for 10 years out the door. The sky was just beginning to lighten, and a few other figures were already moving around the dumpsters in the apartment complex. I quickened my pace, my steel hook expertly snagging a plastic water bottle. "Eleanor, you're out earlier than usual," Brenda called out, poking her head from behind another row of recycling bins. Her hands were deftly breaking down a cardboard box. "Julian called last night. He said his dissertation defense went perfectly." I couldn't help but smile, bending to pick up an aluminum can. "His doctoral commencement is next month." Brenda's movements paused for a second, a complicated look on her face. "Your Julian is really something else. The only one from this neighborhood to get a PhD. She paused again. "He'll be making the big bucks after graduation, right? You won't have to work so hard anymore." I just smiled and didn't answer, continuing to sort through the bins. Plastic bottles, cardboard, aluminum cans. My fingers had eyes of their own, able to distinguish the value of each recyclable item in the near darkness. 20 years of scrapping had honed this skill. By 6:40 in the morning, my 3 sacks were stuffed full. The sun was fully up, and people were starting to move about the complex. I wiped the sweat from my brow, tied the sacks securely, and loaded them onto my pushcart. "Morning, Eleanor. Out early again?" Mrs. Peterson from apartment 7, a teacher, nodded at me as she passed with her briefcase. Her eyes glanced at the bags on my cart and then quickly looked away. I smiled and nodded back, pushing my cart toward home. On the way, I passed the community bulletin board. There was a poster about a city beautification project and a photo of the community's most beautiful family. My eyes lingered on the picture for a moment. Julian and I weren't in it, even though he was the most accomplished young man in the entire neighborhood. Back home, I sorted the recyclables, washed my hands, and started making breakfast. A simple bowl of oatmeal and a cup of black coffee, but it was warm and comforting. As I ate, my gaze drifted to the wall, which was covered with Julian's awards from over the years. From honor roll certificates in elementary school to a full academic scholarship in college, and finally, awards for outstanding papers in grad school. Suddenly, my phone rang. The word "son" on the screen made my heart beat faster. "Mom, it's me." Julian's voice came through the phone, a few decibels higher than usual. "I have some great news to tell you." "I'm listening," I said, putting down my spoon and sitting up straighter. I'm getting married," he said, his voice filled with an excitement he couldn't hide. "It's Victoria, the one I told you about. Her father owns an environmental tech company." My eyes instantly welled up with tears. "That's wonderful. Son, when's the wedding?" There was a sudden silence on the other end for a few seconds. "Next month, on the 18th, at the Grand Lakeshore Hotel," Julian's voice dropped. "Mom, it's a pretty high-end place, and a lot of important people will be there. Your health isn't the best, and it's a long trip, so maybe it's best if you don't." My fingers clenched the tablecloth. "I understand. Mom understands. That's very thoughtful of you. At my age, it's really not a good idea to travel far." "Thanks for understanding, Mom," Julian said, clearly relieved. "After the wedding, I'll bring Victoria to see you." "Good, good." I heard my own voice tremble. "You be good to her." After hanging up, I sat frozen in my chair, my eyes fixed on a faded piece of paper under the glass top of the coffee table. It was something Julian had written when he was 7, in his clumsy, childish handwriting. "I love you, Mommy. When I grow up, I will make sure you have a good life. A single tear fell onto the glass, blooming like a small flower. By the time the early morning sun filtered through the thin curtains, I had already finished sorting the recyclables from the previous night. A small cut from the edge of a can remained on my finger. I absent-mindedly covered it with a bandage. A little scratch like that is nothing for someone in my line of work, as common as an office worker getting a paper cut. The phone rang, startling me. I wiped my hands and walked over to the coffee table. "Hello, is this Julian?" "Hello, ma'am. This is Julian's friend, Mark." A young man's voice came from the other end. Julian asked me to confirm the mailing address for the wedding invitation. He said to send it to your old address back home. I froze for a moment. "What old address? We've always lived here." The line went silent for a few seconds. "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Maybe I got it wrong. Julian said you were his mother, the wife of the late Professor Chen." The strength suddenly left my fingers, and the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. Professor Chen, that was my husband, Julian's father, who passed away 20 years ago. "Mark," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking, "what does Julian usually tell you all about me?" I heard an awkward cough on the other end. "Ma'am, well?" "Julian said you've been recuperating at the old family home in the countryside and that your health isn't great, so you rarely come out." His voice got quieter and quieter. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I might have said the wrong thing." "It's all right." I took a deep breath. "Please tell Julian to just send the invitation to the old address. I'll get it." After hanging up, I slowly slid to the floor. The awards on the wall glittered in the sunlight, every single one of them placed there by my own hands. I remembered when Julian was in the 3rd grade and got his first honor roll certificate. He had run home, so excited, while I was squatting by a dumpster sorting recyclables. He held up the certificate with pride, completely ignoring the surprised stares of his classmates. "Mom, I'm going to get lots and lots of awards and cover this whole wall." Back then, he was never ashamed of my work. I mechanically stood up and pulled a metal box from under the bed. Inside were all the gifts Julian had ever given me. An origami box made from scrap paper, a necklace made from soda can pull, tabs, and a scarf he bought me with his first scholarship money in college. At the very bottom was a photograph from his master's degree graduation. He was in his cap and gown, standing at the university gate, surrounded by smiling classmates. I wasn't in the picture. I had a high fever that day but insisted on going to the ceremony. When Julian saw me at the gate, his face changed instantly. "Mom, why did you come dressed like that?" he whispered, his eyes darting to my faded old jacket and stained canvas shoes. I was in a hurry to catch the bus and didn't have time to change," I said, frantically trying to smooth my collar. He quickly had someone take a picture of us at the gate and then told me to go home. He never brought that photo home. The phone in the metal box suddenly buzzed. It was a text from Julian. "Mom, did Mark contact you? I had him send the invitation to our cousin's place in the country. Your health hasn't been good lately, so you shouldn't be traveling back and forth." I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. He didn't even want his friends to know where I lived now. That afternoon, as if possessed, I got on a bus heading downtown. The university where Julian worked was an hour's drive away. I rarely went to bother him. But today, it felt like some force was pushing me, telling me I had to go see him. The campus was even bigger than I had imagined, with impressive academic buildings, clean tree-lined paths, and students on bicycles weaving in and out. I stood in the plaza in front of the Humanities building, feeling completely out of place. "Ma'am, are you looking for someone?" A kind-looking girl with glasses asked. "I'm looking for Professor Julian Chen." "Oh, Professor Chen. He should be in his office, room 305. Would you like me to take you?" I quickly shook my head. No, that's okay. I'll just wait for him here." The girl gave me a strange look and walked away. I found an inconspicuous bench and sat down, taking a plastic container out of my bag. It was filled with the homemade pickles Julian loved, which I had specially prepared this morning. After waiting for nearly 2 hours, my back ached. Finally, I saw Julian walk out of the building. He was wearing a crisp, light gray suit, his hair perfectly combed, laughing and talking with a few other professors. In the sunlight, My son looked so handsome and distinguished, just like his father when he was young. I instinctively stood up, then quickly sat back down. Julian had told me he needed to maintain a professional image at work. I looked down at my faded plaid shirt, my worn-out jeans, and the plain plastic container in my hands. They walked closer, and I could even hear Julian's voice. I really have to thank Dean Thompson for his help with the wedding. The Grand Lake Shore is impossible to book. Julian, a female professor, asked, I hear your mother was a professor's wife. How come we've never met her? Julian's pace faltered for a fraction of a second. My mother's health isn't great. She's been resting quietly in the countryside. My father passed away when I was young, so she had a tough time raising me on her own. My heart felt like it was being pierced by a needle. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't telling the whole truth either. After they had walked away, I slowly stood up, left the plastic container on the bench, and quietly left. Those pickles would probably be thrown away by a custodian, or they would spoil in the Sunday, just like something between my son and me was quietly spoiling. On the bus ride home, I stared at the passing scenery and thought about the year Julian went off to college. He got into a top state university, but tuition was a problem. I went door to door, borrowing money from neighbors, but I was still short $2,000. The day before he was supposed to leave, I knelt outside the university president's office. Mr. President, my son is a brilliant student. Could you please give us a few more days? I pleaded, my hands trembling as I pulled out all of Julian's awards and report cards from my bag. The president helped me up and sighed. Mrs. Chen, the university has student loan programs. Why didn't you say something sooner? That night, Julian told me with red eyes, Mom, I will make something of myself. I'll never let you be humiliated like that again. And now, my very existence had become his humiliation. Eleanor, long time no see. A familiar voice broke my reverie. It was Mrs. Davis from the building next door, sitting down beside me with her grocery basket. Hello, Mrs. Davis. I managed a weak smile. I hear your Julian is getting married, she asked with a grin. When are you bringing the new bride home for us to meet? Soon. As soon as they're not so busy, I answered robotically. You're so lucky, raising such a successful son, she said, patting my hand. I heard the wedding is at some grand hotel. Your son must be making a fortune now, right? Why does he still let you do this dirty hard work? My fingers twisted together unconsciously. I can't sit still. Besides, Julian sends me money every month. It's my own choice to keep doing this. Mrs. Davis looked at me with a hint of disbelief but didn't say anything more. Back home, I sat exhausted on the sofa. My eyes fell on the calendar on the wall. Julian's wedding was in 23 days. I picked up my phone and scrolled to the digital invitation saved in my gallery. The gold leaf font read, You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Mr. Julian Chen and Miss Victoria Pierce. Below were the hotel address and time. My name was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, it started to rain. I got up to close the window and accidentally knocked over the metal box on the coffee table. The small trinkets inside scattered across the floor. Among them was a tiny paper boat Julian had folded from a candy wrapper in elementary school. On it, he had written in crooked letters, Mama's ship. I knelt on the floor, picking up these fragmented memories, one by one, and finally, the tears came flooding out. Several days of continuous rain made my joints ache, a chronic problem from years of bending over to pick up scrap. I stood in front of the mirror, carefully smoothing the wrinkles on a new navy blue dress. I had bought it on sale at the department store. It cost me half a month's income. The tag still read classic style for the mature woman. Mom is going to Julian's wedding, I whispered to my reflection, running my fingers through my graying hair. I had gone to a salon yesterday to get it cut into a short bob and dyed a dark brown. It made me look much younger. On the coffee table sat a beautifully wrapped gift box. Inside was a pair of small, solid gold figurines, a man and a woman, symbolizing the newlyweds. I had used 3 years' worth of personal savings to buy them. It was almost everything I had. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Julian. Mom, the weather is bad today. You need to take care of your health. It's better if you don't come. I stared at the screen for a long time before slowly typing a reply. Mom is already ready. I'm leaving soon. After sending the message, I turned off my phone. Today, no matter what, I had to see my son get married with my own eyes, even if it was just from a distance. The Grand Lakeshore Hotel was the most luxurious 5-star hotel in the city. Standing before its magnificent, glittering entrance, I instinctively shrank back. The driveway was lined with luxury cars, and guests in tuxedos and evening gowns walked into the lobby, laughing and talking. I took a deep breath, clutched my gift box, and followed them in. "May I see your invitation, please?" A hostess at the door stopped me politely. I fumbled in my bag and pulled out a printout of the digital invitation. "This is my son's wedding, Julian Chen." The hostess checked her list, then looked me up and down. "I'm sorry, your name isn't on the list. Are you a relative of the bride?" "I am the groom's mother." My voice trembled slightly. The hostess's expression turned strange. "Please wait a moment," she said, speaking quietly into her walkie-talkie. A few minutes later, a young woman in a white wedding gown hurried over. Her makeup was exquisite, but her eyes were as cold as ice. "You're Julian's mother?" she hissed, her voice low but unable to hide the disgust in her tone. "Didn't Julian tell you not to come?" I took a step back. "I just wanted to see my son's wedding." "Just to see," Victoria sneered. "See? Look at yourself. What do you look like? Do you have any idea what kind of people are here today?" Her voice suddenly rose. "Security. We have a homeless person trying to get in here." All eyes in the lobby instantly turned to us. My face burned with shame, and the gift box nearly fell from my hands. "What's going on?" Julian's voice came from behind me. I turned to see my son in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, a groom's boutonniere pinned to his lapel. He looked so handsome, so unfamiliar. "Julian." I reached out a trembling hand. Julian's face went pale. "Mom? Why are you here?" He rushed over, but not to hug me. He grabbed my arm and pulled me to the side. "Mom, I told you," he whispered harshly. "This isn't the place for you. Why are you dressed like this?" I looked down at my dress. It wasn't a designer brand, but it was the best thing I owned. "I brought a gift," I said, holding out the beautifully wrapped box. Julian didn't take it. His eyes darted around nervously. "Mom, just go home. I'll call you later." "Julian, the ceremony is about to start," Victoria called from a distance, her tone impatient. "Coming," Julian called back. He turned to me, his voice now almost a plea. "Mom, I'm begging you. Please, just go home, okay? I'll come see you tomorrow." My vision blurred, but I nodded. "Okay, Mom will go now." As I turned to leave, I heard Victoria's sharp voice. "If you come back, I'm calling the cops on you for trespassing." The words stabbed into my heart like a knife. I walked faster, but I bumped into a well-dressed middle-aged man. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, looking down, trying to get past him. "Wait a minute," the man said, suddenly grabbing my arm. "You're Eleanor Vance." I looked up in shock and saw a vaguely familiar face. Memories flashed back Robert Pierce, the CEO of an environmental tech company. We had done business together over a decade ago. "It really is you," Robert Pierce said, his eyes wide with astonishment. "Victoria, Julian, come over here, quickly. Do you two have any idea who this is?" "This is Eleanor Vance, the founder of Evergreen Environmental Solutions." The lobby fell silent. Everyone's eyes were on me. I saw the expression on Julian's face shift from shock to confusion, and finally, to utter disbelief. "Dad, you must be mistaken," Victoria said, walking over and shooting me a disdainful look. "This is Julian's mother. She's just a scrap collector." "Nonsense." Robert Pierce cut his daughter off sharply. "Mrs. Vance started Evergreen Environmental from scratch. She was a legend in our industry." He turned to me, his tone suddenly respectful. "Eleanor, where have you been all these years? The whole industry thought you'd moved abroad." My fingers tightened around the gift box. "You're mistaken, Mr. Pierce," I said calmly. "I'm just a scrap collector." With that, I turned and walked toward the main entrance. Behind me, a wave of murmurs erupted. "Impossible. I know I'm not wrong." Robert's voice followed me. "Eleanor, when we worked together, I didn't look back. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped outside. The sunlight was so bright it made my eyes water. The gift box in my hand had been crushed at some point. I sat down by the fountain outside the hotel and tremblingly opened the box. The pair of golden figurines were bent and twisted from the impact, as absurd as the whole scene today. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the lobby. I saw Julian run out, looking around frantically. When he saw me, the expression on his face was impossible to describe. "Mom," he walked toward me, his voice hoarse. "Was what Mr. Pierce said true? Are you really the founder of Evergreen Environmental?" I looked at him calmly. "It's true. The company went bankrupt the year you turned 10. Julian froze, as if struck by lightning. Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what? That your mother used to be a CEO and now she makes a living collecting recyclables?" I gave a bitter laugh. "What difference would it have made?" Julian's face turned ashen. "Mom, that's not what I meant. I just what? Just didn't want your high society friends to know you have a mother who collects scrap?" I stood up and brushed off my dress. "It's okay. Mom understands." I pushed the deformed gift box into his hands. "Happy wedding day, son." As I turned to leave, Julian grabbed my wrist. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I really didn't know." I gently pulled my hand away. "The ceremony is about to start. Don't keep your bride waiting." After I had walked some distance, I heard Julian's cries behind me. It was the first time I had heard him cry like that in over 20 years, but I didn't turn back. I just straightened my spine and walked toward the bus stop. On the bus, I got a call from Robert Pierce. "Eleanor, I am so sorry about today. That daughter of mine is so thoughtless." His voice was full of apology. "Please, when would be a good time for me to visit and apologize in person?" "There's no need," I said calmly. "Let the past be the past." After hanging up, I looked at the passing scenery and suddenly felt an immense exhaustion. When I got home, I took off the new dress and changed back into my work clothes. I picked up my steel hook and my sacks. Scrap doesn't lie. It doesn't judge you. As long as you put in the work, it gives you a return. It's so much simpler than people. 3 days after the wedding fiasco, I was collecting recyclables in the neighborhood as usual. The only difference was that now, my neighbors looked at me with a new curiosity and scrutiny. "Eleanor, I heard you used to be a big CEO," Brenda whispered, sidling up to me. I just smiled and continued sorting cardboard. "That was a long time ago." "Wow, you really kept that a secret." Brenda slapped her thigh. "I always said, 'Your Julian is so smart. He must have gotten your good genes.'" I didn't respond, just neatly bundled the sorted materials. Since my past was revealed, conversations like this happened almost every day. People seemed to have forgotten that just a few days ago, they looked at me with pity or disdain. When I got home, a black sedan was parked outside my door. Robert Pierce stood there with a sullen-faced Victoria beside him. "Eleanor, I apologize for the intrusion," Robert said respectfully, stepping forward. "I brought Victoria here to apologize to you." Victoria looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen. She had clearly been crying. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I was so rude that day." I looked at them, then took out my key and opened the door. "Come in." The modest living room made the two of them seem out of place. Victoria's eyes scanned the wall of Julian's awards, then she quickly looked down. "Eleanor, all these years," Robert began, choosing his words carefully. "Evergreen Environmental was doing so well back then. How could it?" I poured them tea and calmly recounted the story. 20 years ago, my environmental company was already well established. My husband was in charge of research and development, and I managed the business. One afternoon, he was driving to an industry conference and was caught in a multi-car pileup on the freeway. The police called me while I was picking Julian up from school. My fingers gently traced the rim of my teacup. He was only 10. He kept asking when Dad was coming home. After my husband's funeral, my business partner, a man named Tom, disappeared with all our liquid assets and technical documents. Overnight, the company was in ruins. Creditors were at our door every day, and the court seized all company assets. I gave a bitter laugh. During the hardest times, Julian and I survived on bread and canned soup. Robert looked stunned. Tom, he was finally caught last year. In Singapore. I shook my head. The money was long gone by then. Victoria asked in a small voice. Then, ma'am, why didn't you tell Julian? Tell him what? I looked at the photos of Julian on the wall. Tell him his mother used to be rich, but now she has to collect scrap to survive? Let him carry that burden at such a young age? I stood up, took an album from a drawer, and opened it to a specific page. It was a photo from the company's grand opening. A younger me, in a business suit, smiling under the Evergreen Environmental Solutions sign. After the bankruptcy, I moved here with Julian. To pay off the debts and put him through school, I started collecting recyclables. I closed the album. I started from the very bottom, slowly building up experience and contacts. Now, I have my own small recycling depot and a few regular employees. It's not a big operation, but it's enough to live on. Robert's expression changed to one of deep respect. So you've been starting over all these years. Environmental work is what I know. Recycling is part of the environmental industry, I smiled. I just continued in a different way. Victoria suddenly burst into tears. Ma'am, I really didn't know. Julian didn't know either. It's okay, I said calmly. You know now. After they left, I got a call from Julian. The word son flashed on the screen for a long time. In the end, I didn't answer. That evening, I took out my husband's old briefcase. Inside were his design schematics and notebooks. On one page, he had written, "A gift for my Julian. Research on new eco-friendly materials, patent number 30X. It was dated the day before he died. I hugged the briefcase and wept silently. If my husband were still alive, if the company hadn't gone bankrupt, would Julian's life have been completely different? Would he have been proud of me, instead of ashamed? The next morning, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Julian standing outside. He looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot. Mom, his voice was hoarse. Can we talk? I stepped aside, and he walked in, immediately kneeling before the wall of awards. Mom, I'm sorry. His shoulders shook violently. I had no idea you sacrificed so much for me. I didn't help him up. I just sat on the sofa and asked calmly, if I were still just an ordinary old woman who collects scrap, would you still have come to apologize? Julian looked up, his face streaked with tears. Mom. Son, I don't blame you for wanting a better life, I said softly. I'm just sad that you saw your own mother as a source of shame. Julian crawled over to me and hugged my legs, sobbing uncontrollably. I stroked his hair, just as I did when he had nightmares as a child. Mom, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Julian knelt before me for a full hour, crying like a child. Finally, I helped him up and poured him a cup of hot tea. Mom, can you forgive me? He asked, his fingers still trembling as he held the cup. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I asked a question. Julian, do you remember the first day we moved here, when you were 10? Julian paused, then nodded. I remember. It was raining really hard. You asked me why we had to live in such a small place, I recalled. I told you it was because Dad was gone, and we had to start a new life. I remember I cried for a long time that night, Julian said, looking down. You held me and said you'd always be with me. Then you started middle school, I continued, and you didn't want me to pick you up from school anymore. Once, it was pouring rain, and I brought an umbrella for you. You pretended you didn't know me, and told your friends your nanny was there to pick you up. Julian's face turned pale. Mom, I don't blame you, son, I sighed. Teenagers are all concerned with appearances, and you were always smart. You went to good schools where your classmates came from wealthy families. Julian suddenly grabbed my hand. Mom, it wasn't just that. It wasn't just about appearances, his voice choked. I was scared. Scared of what? I was scared that if people knew we were poor, they'd look down on me. I was scared I'd never escape the label of being the poor kid. Julian's tears fell onto the back of my hand. So I studied like crazy. I wanted to change my fate with my own efforts. I thought if I was successful enough, I could give you a good life. I gently wiped away his tears. And now you've done it. You have a PhD? You're a university professor? You married a rich man's daughter? Why were you still afraid to acknowledge me as your mother? Julian was silent for a long time before he managed to speak. Because deep down, I still believed that being poor was something to be ashamed of. He looked up, his eyes filled with pain. Mom, I hate that part of myself. I pulled him into my arms, just like when he was little. Silly boy. Poverty isn't a disgrace. Being ashamed of where you come from is? That night, Julian insisted on staying over. He slept in his childhood bed, his legs too long to stretch out completely, but he said it was the most peaceful night's sleep he'd had in years. The next morning, I was woken by sounds from the kitchen. I walked in to see Julian clumsily trying to fry eggs. Mom, you sit. I'll make breakfast. There were beads of sweat on his forehead, and his white shirt was splattered with oil. I couldn't help but laugh. A PhD who can't even fry an egg. Julian scratched his head, embarrassed. I usually just eat at the cafeteria or get takeout. We ate a simple breakfast together, like a real mother and son. After the meal, Julian offered to help me sort recyclables. He was clumsy, but he learned earnestly. Mom, I want to take a few days off to spend time with you, he said while bundling cardboard. I shook my head. No need. You're newly married. You should be spending time with your wife. Julian's expression turned complicated. Victoria, she's staying with her parents. She said she needs time to think about our marriage. I didn't ask any more questions, just patted his shoulder. For the next few days, Julian came over after work to help me with the scrap and have dinner with me. The neighbors stared, but he no longer tried to hide. Instead, he greeted them openly. On the fifth evening, Robert Pierce and Victoria came to the door again. This time, Victoria was carrying several shopping bags full of gifts, her eyes still red. As soon as she walked in, she knelt on the floor. Ma'am, I truly know I was wrong. Please forgive me. Robert explained from the side. Eleanor, Victoria has been reflecting these past few days. I spoiled her growing up. She doesn't know any better. I helped Victoria up. Get up, the floor is cold, Victoria cried. Ma'am, Julian and I are truly in love. I didn't know his mother was you. If I had known, if I were just an ordinary old scrap collector, would you not love him any more? I asked calmly. Victoria froze, then shook her head frantically. No, that's not it. I was raised to believe in marrying into the right social class. My dad said. Eleanor, Robert interrupted his daughter, his face grave. Actually, my company has been in serious trouble recently. He gave a bitter laugh. Our so-called wealth is all propped up by bank loans. Even the wedding was just for show. This unexpected confession made Julian's eyes go wide. Mr. Pierce, what are you saying? Robert slumped into a chair. The environmental tech industry is incredibly competitive. My company has been losing money for 3 years straight. The wedding? It was really an attempt to connect with some potential investors. Victoria's face was pale. Dad, you never told me. Silly girl, how could I make you worry? Robert stroked his daughter's hair, then turned to me. Eleanor, it's shameful to admit, but I came here today not just to apologize, but also to ask for your advice on how to save my company. I looked at the father and daughter before me and suddenly understood where Victoria's snobbery came from. A father teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, pinning all his hopes on his daughter marrying into wealth. Robert, I said, choosing my words carefully, we can discuss business later. But first, I looked at Victoria. I want to know what your feelings are toward my son now. Victoria turned to Julian, her eyes full of tears. Julian, I'm sorry. I've been so selfish. If you're willing to forgive me. Julian stepped forward and took her hands. Victoria, I was wrong too. I was so obsessed with appearances that I didn't tell you the truth. Looking at the young couple, an idea came to me. Robert, I have a proposal. Your company has the equipment and technology. I have the recycling network and market resources. Perhaps we could cooperate. Robert's eyes lit up. Eleanor, you mean a merger? We can discuss the details later, I smiled. But first, I have a condition. Name it. Regardless of whether we merge, Victoria must start from the ground up. She needs to learn every aspect of this industry. I looked at Victoria, including sorting and collecting recyclables. Victoria bit her lip and nodded firmly. Ma'am, I'm willing to learn. Robert excitedly shook my hand. Eleanor, thank you. Thank you so much. After they left, Julian stayed to help me with the dishes. His hands were submerged in soapy water when he suddenly said, Mom, I want to resign from my university position and join your company. I looked at him, surprised. Why? Being a professor is such a respectable job. Because I want to truly understand your world, Julian said earnestly, starting from the very bottom, just like you did. I touched his face but didn't answer immediately. The moonlight streamed in, illuminating the awards on the wall. Those pieces of paper that once represented honor were now just simple mementos of a boy's journey. Real growth never comes from certificates and degrees, but from the courage to face your own shortcomings and accept your entire past. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains. I gently touched my husband's old briefcase. For the first time in 20 years, I decided to open his final research notes. The yellowed pages were filled with dense experimental data and formulas, some pages stained with old coffee rings. Mom, are you awake? Julian's voice came from outside the door. I quickly wiped a tear from my eye. I'm awake. Come in. Julian entered and saw the briefcase in my hands. He paused. That's Dad's. I carefully turned a page. The day before your father passed away, he was still revising this design. Julian sat down beside me, his fingers lightly touching the notes, as if he could feel his father's presence through the paper. His eyes were suddenly drawn to a page marked, A Gift for My Julian. What's this? His voice trembled. I took a deep breath. Your father was researching a new type of eco-friendly material, one that could extract high-value components from waste plastic. This patent, I pointed to the number on the document, was supposed to be your 18th birthday present. Julian's eyes widened. Mom, you're saying? After the company went bankrupt, the patent was seized by the bank, I said with a sad smile. I heard it was sold a few times. I don't know who has it now. Julian shot to his feet. Then we have to get it back. That's Dad's life's work. I pulled him back down. Not so fast, son. I've been following the field for years. I pulled a stack of newsletters from the bottom of the briefcase. Look, similar technologies are already in use. Julian quickly scanned the articles, his eyes growing brighter. Mom, these technologies are all based on Dad's research. Partially, I nodded. But your father's original formula was more efficient and less costly. Julian suddenly hugged me. Mom, you've been following this all along. I gently patted his back. The environment is my field, son. Even though the company was gone, I never gave up on the industry. We sat in silence for a while as the sun slowly filled the room. Mom, I want to go see Dad, Julian said suddenly. The cemetery was on a hillside on the outskirts of the city. For 20 years, I had visited almost every month. Julian, however, rarely came. He was too far away as a child and too busy as an adult. My husband's gravestone was simple, with just his name and dates. Julian knelt before it, silent for a long time. I stood to the side, giving them their time together. Dad, Julian finally spoke, his voice choked with emotion. I'm sorry it took me so long to visit. I let Mom down. I turned away, unable to watch his shaking back. Dad, I finally understand now. The legacy you and Mom gave me was more precious than anything. It wasn't money or status, it was integrity. A breeze rustled through the nearby pine trees, like a soft reply. As we were leaving the cemetery, Julian's phone rang. It was Victoria. Honey? Yes, I'm with Mom. He glanced at me. Okay, we'll wait for you. Hanging up, he explained. Victoria said she wants to come and formally apologize to you. I nodded. You two talk. I'll go get lunch started. Back home, I got busy in the kitchen. Julian insisted on helping. Though he was clumsy, his knife skills were already improving. The doorbell rang just as we finished preparing a simple meal. Victoria stood at the door, no longer the arrogant bride from the wedding, but a nervous young woman with red, swollen eyes. She held a bouquet of carnations, and behind her stood a solemn-looking Robert Pierce. "Ma'am." Victoria's voice was a whisper. "These are for you." I took the flowers and stepped aside. "We were just about to eat. Please join us." At the dinner table, Victoria barely touched her food, just fidgeted with her napkin. Robert, on the other hand, ate heartily, praising my cooking. "Eleanor, to be honest with you," Robert said, putting down his chopsticks, his expression turning serious, "the company's situation is even worse than I thought." Julian and Victoria both looked up. "How bad?" I asked. "If we can't make the bank payment next month, the company will be foreclosed on," Robert said with a bitter smile. "I came here today not just to apologize, but to formally ask for your help." Victoria looked at her father in shock. "Dad, didn't you say it was just a small problem?" Robert looked down in shame. "I didn't want you to worry." I looked at the father and daughter, and was reminded of myself and Julian. So many parents, trying to protect their children, choose to bear life's burdens alone. "Robert," I said, choosing my words, "I can consider merging the companies, but I have 2 conditions." Robert immediately sat up straight. "Name them." "First, after the merger, the company must retain all its current blue-collar employees. No layoffs, done." "Second," I looked at Victoria. "Victoria must start at the bottom and truly learn every part of this business." Victoria bit her lip and nodded firmly. "Ma'am, I'm willing." After lunch, Robert rushed back to his office, leaving Victoria with us. Julian suggested we visit my recycling depot, and though Victoria hesitated, she agreed. The depot was in an old factory building on the edge of town. 3 workers were sorting a recent delivery of scrap. When they saw me, they greeted me warmly. "Hey, Eleanor, what brings you here today?" "Bringing my son and future daughter-in-law for a tour," I said with a smile. Victoria, in her delicate dress and high heels, looked completely out of place amidst the piles of scrap. An aluminum can rolled to her feet, and she instinctively stepped back. "Mike, get Victoria a pair of work boots and some gloves," I instructed. After changing, Victoria seemed to relax a little. Julian was already with one of the veteran workers, Larry, learning how to distinguish between different types of plastics. "Ma'am?" Victoria called to me softly. "What can I do?" I handed her a sorting stick. "Here, help me sort these papers. Clean ones on the left, stained ones on the right." The 3 of us worked together under the Sunday. Sweat quickly soaked our clothes, but no one complained. When our eyes met, Victoria would give a shy smile, and Julian would wink at me, like a child who had just been praised. By evening, we were exhausted but happy. Victoria's white dress was now gray, but the smile on her face was more genuine than it had been on her wedding day. "Ma'am, thank you for today," she said as she was leaving, giving me a sudden hug. "Can I come back tomorrow?" I patted her back. "Of course. You're always welcome." Watching her car drive away, Julian said quietly, "Mom, thank you for giving her a chance." I shook my head. This is a chance for all of us. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in a long while. In my dream, my husband was standing under the evergreen environmental sign, smiling at me, while a young Julian played nearby. At 6 o'clock the next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Victoria in casual clothes and a ponytail, holding 2 bags of breakfast. "Ma'am, I brought breakfast burritos," she said with an eager smile. "Julian said you like the ones with chorizo." I looked at her, surprised. "So early?" "Dad said the depot opens at 7. I want to get there early to learn." Her eyes were bright, like a student excited for a field trip. Julian came out of the guest room, rubbing his eyes. "Victoria? What are you?" "I've made up my mind. I'm going to do what you said, ma'am, and start from the very bottom," Victoria said, puffing out her chest. "Starting today, I'm an intern at the recycling depot." At the breakfast table, Victoria excitedly asked about the depot's operations, while Julian thoughtfully flipped through his father's notebooks. "Mom," he suddenly looked up. "Dad's formula, if we could recreate it, it would be a huge help for the merged company, right?" I nodded. "Not just a help. It could become our core competitive advantage. I want to try, Julian said firmly. My field at the university was materials science. Maybe, Victoria leaned in, curious. What formula? Julian briefly explained his father's research. Victoria's eyes grew wider and wider. That's incredible. If we could really do that, the market potential. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, I interrupted with a smile. Today, your task is to learn the 7 standard classifications for plastics. The depot was even busier than the day before. Weekend collections were always heavier. I had Victoria work with a young man named Mike on paper sorting, while Julian went with Larry to handle electronic waste. Ma'am! Less than an hour later, Victoria ran over, holding a piece of paper. Look at this. It was a discarded blueprint, stamped with the words, Evergreen Environmental Solutions, R&D Department. My hands trembled slightly. Where did you find this? In that pile of paper, Victoria pointed to a corner. It looks like old files cleaned out from an office. The 3 of us immediately started sifting through that pile of paper. 2 hours later, we had found over a dozen pages of fragmented blueprints and experiment logs, all my husband's notes. This is unbelievable, Julian said, carefully smoothing out a drawing. Mom, this could be Dad's original research data. Victoria had already taken photos of all the documents and sent them to her father. Dad, you have to see this. During our lunch break, Robert Pierce rushed over. He examined the materials, his hands shaking with excitement. Eleanor, this is fate. It turned out that Robert's company had recently been trying to develop a similar technology, but was stuck on the issue of cost. These documents provided the key to solving their problem. Eleanor, I have an idea, Robert said, his eyes shining. Can we form a joint research team to verify the feasibility of this formula as soon as possible? I looked at Julian's hopeful face and nodded. We can, but the foundational work can't stop. I pointed at the mountains of scrap. The roots of the company are right here. That afternoon, we split into 2 groups. Julian and Robert worked on the technical plan, while Victoria and I continued sorting. Victoria worked even harder than before, even asking to learn how to operate the baling machine. Ma'am, is this the start button? She asked, standing by the machine, her face smudged with dirt, completely unaware. I nodded, standing behind her to guide her. Yes, but first make sure there are no metal objects inside. The machine roared to life. Victoria operated it, nervous but excited. When the first neat bale of cardboard came out, she jumped for joy. I did it! In that moment, I saw my younger self in her, curious about the unknown, passionate about challenges. By the end of the day, everyone was exhausted but fulfilled. Julian and Robert had drafted a preliminary technical roadmap, and Victoria and I had completed all the sorting for the day. Mom, look! Julian showed me a chart on his laptop. Based on Dad's notes, we simulated the reaction process. Theoretically, it's completely viable, Robert added. If we can produce a sample, we can apply for a provisional patent to protect the technology from being leaked. Victoria suddenly raised her hand. I have a suggestion. We should conduct market research first to understand the needs of potential customers. I was surprised by her business acumen. You're right, Victoria. What are your thoughts? Victoria excitedly opened her tablet. I've checked. The current market price for similar products is... She launched into a detailed analysis of market data, sounding nothing like the spoiled brat from just a week ago. On the way home, Julian quietly said to me, Mom, I've never seen Victoria like this. She studied marketing in college, but she never had a chance to apply it. I smiled. Everyone has a talent. They just need the right stage to shine. After dinner, Victoria volunteered to do the dishes. Listening to the clatter of plates and running water from the kitchen, Julian asked in a low voice, Mom, have you really forgiven us? I looked at his young face, full of guilt and hope. Son, Mom was never truly angry with you. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is to grow from them. I patted his hand. Seeing you and Victoria today, I'm very proud. Victoria came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands, a satisfied smile on her face. Ma'am, the kitchen is all clean. I'd like to come back tomorrow, if that's okay. Of course, I smiled. But tomorrow we're going to a different site. The work there is tougher. No problem, Victoria said, puffing out her chest. I already know how to operate the baler. Looking at her confident expression, I thought of the sharp-tongued girl at the wedding. Underneath that snobbish facade, she was just an ordinary young woman, eager for approval and a chance to prove herself. Late that night, after Julian and Victoria had left, I stood by the window, watching their car disappear. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Eleanor, I heard you're partnering with Robert Pierce. Be careful. His company owes money to loan sharks. An old friend. I stared at the message for a long time but didn't reply. Tomorrow, I needed to have a serious talk with Robert. The foundation of our partnership had to be absolute honesty. The next morning, I went straight to Robert Pierce's company. The receptionist, seeing my simple clothes, was a bit dismissive. Do you have an appointment? No, but I think he'll see me, I said calmly. Please tell him Eleanor Vance is here. A few minutes later, Robert himself came out to greet me, looking nervous. Eleanor, so early? I got straight to the point. Robert, we need to talk. About the loan sharks. Robert's face went white. He led me into his office, locked the door, and poured 2 cups of tea with trembling hands. Eleanor, how did you know? That doesn't matter. I looked him in the eye. What matters is, how much do you owe? And who is it? Robert sank into his chair, looking 10 years older in an instant. 20 million. To Silas Thorne's crew. I sucked in a breath. Silas Thorne was a notorious crime boss in the city, known for his predatory lending. How did you get into so much debt? The company kept losing money. The banks wouldn't approve another loan, Robert said, holding his head in his hands. I thought if the new product was successful. So that's why you were trying to network with investors at the wedding. Robert nodded. Silas gave me a final deadline. If I don't pay him back by next month, he's going to. He didn't finish, but the implication was clear. I thought for a moment. Does Victoria know about this? No, Robert shook his head. She's always thought we were well off. I didn't want her to worry. Such a familiar excuse. How many parents choose to bear the weight of the world alone to protect their children? Robert, I sighed. Do you know why I chose to start over with a recycling business after my company went bankrupt? He looked at me blankly. Because in this industry, integrity is more important than anything. I looked him straight in the eye. Back then, if my husband and I had cooked the books or taken out high-interest loans, maybe we could have survived temporarily. But we chose to face the consequences, even if it meant losing everything. Robert's eyes reddened. Eleanor, You have 2 choices now, I continued. 1, you keep hiding this until Silas comes after you, putting Victoria and Julian in danger. And the second? He asked, desperately. Second, we tell the kids everything today, and then we figure out a solution together. Robert was silent for a long time before finally giving a heavy nod. That afternoon, we held a family meeting in the small office at the recycling depot. When Robert confessed everything, Victoria's face turned pale. Dad, what are you saying? Her voice trembled. Our family is going bankrupt? Robert looked down in shame. I'm sorry, Victoria. I've been hiding this from you. Julian took her hand, comforting her softly. It's okay. We'll figure this out together. I took out my phone and dialed a number. Chief Miller, it's Eleanor Vance. Yes, long time no see. I need your help with something. Chief Miller was an old friend who now worked for the city police department. After I explained the situation, he promised to connect me with the task force that handles organized crime. Eleanor, this is complicated, he said over the phone. Thorne's crew is slippery. Getting hard evidence is tough. You need to prioritize your safety. After I hung up, I saw 4 anxious faces looking at me. I took a deep breath. Here's the situation. After a discussion, we decided to split up. Robert would be responsible for cooperating with the police to gather evidence. Julian, Victoria, and I would accelerate the new technology's development, trying to produce a sample as quickly as possible to attract legitimate investors. The following days were like a war. Julian practically lived in the lab. Victoria used her business skills to contact potential clients and investors. I managed the overall strategy while ensuring the depot's daily operations continued smoothly. A week later, late at night, I was organizing some files when Julian called. "Mom, we did it. The first batch of samples tested perfectly." When I arrived at the lab, Robert and Victoria were already there. Julian held up a small, pale green, granular material, as excited as a child. "Mom, look. This is what Dad wanted to create." I took the material, gently stroking it. It was light yet strong, with a fine texture like the veins of a leaf. "What did the test results say?" I asked. Victoria handed me a report. 30% stronger than similar products on the market, but at half the cost. "We already have 5 companies that have expressed interest in placing pre-orders." Robert was so emotional he was in tears. "We're saved. The company is saved." Just then, Victoria's phone rang. She answered, and her face fell. "Dad, someone just trashed the office. The security guard said it was Silas Thorne's men." Robert's face lost all its color. "It's over. They've run out of patience." Julian immediately took out his phone. "I'm calling the police." "Wait," I stopped him. "Don't tip them off yet. Chief Miller said Thorne is smart. Without solid proof, it will be hard to convict him." "Then what do we do?" Victoria was on the verge of tears. "Next time, they might come after us directly." I thought for a moment, and an idea came to me. "Robert, tomorrow you schedule a meeting with Silas. Tell him you found an investor and need to renegotiate the payment plan." "That's too dangerous," Julian objected. "Hear me out," I continued. "We'll arrange for the police to be there to make an arrest during the exchange. But we need Silas to admit to the loan sharking on tape." Robert hesitated. "What if something goes wrong?" "Dad, I trust Eleanor's plan," Victoria said suddenly, her eyes determined. "We can't live in fear forever." Ultimately, we finalized the plan. The next day, under heavy police surveillance, Robert met Silas at a tea house. When Silas arrogantly pulled out the loan documents and threatened Robert's family, the undercover officers swarmed in. With the case resolved, we could finally focus on planning the new company. But just as we were moving forward, my body gave out. It was a stormy afternoon. I was at the depot directing a truck when everything went black, and I collapsed in the mud. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Julian and Victoria were by my side, their eyes red and swollen. "Mom, why didn't you tell us sooner?" Julian said, holding my hand. "The doctor said, you have severe anemia and gastritis." I smiled weakly. "It's nothing, just an old problem." Victoria handed me a glass of warm water. "Ma'am, don't worry, we've got the depot covered." Looking at their concerned faces, I suddenly felt that all the hardship had been worth it. While I was in the hospital, Julian was organizing my things at home and found the pill bottles in my drawer. They were the cheapest painkillers available, just a few dollars a bottle, but they were harsh on the stomach. "Mom," he asked with red eyes, "have you been taking these this whole time?" I nodded gently. "They work well enough." Julian suddenly knelt by my bedside, choking back sobs. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I was ashamed of you for collecting scrap, but I had no idea you couldn't even afford better medicine for yourself." I stroked his hair. "Silly boy. It wasn't a hardship for me. Seeing you like this now makes me happier than anything." Victoria stood by, silently crying. She suddenly said, "Ma'am, when you get out of the hospital, can you teach me how to make those pickles? Julian said they were his favorite thing you made growing up." I smiled and nodded. The rain outside had stopped. A ray of sunshine broke through the clouds, casting a small, warm patch of light on the hospital room floor. On the day of my discharge, the doctor repeatedly warned me to rest. But as soon as I got home, I received a call from Larry. "Eleanor, bad news. A group of people are here at the depot. They say they're here to confiscate our equipment." I immediately had Julian drive me to the depot. From a distance, I could see several official-looking cars parked at the entrance. A few people in uniforms were talking to Larry. "What's going on?" I asked as I got out of the car. An official showed me his credentials. "We're from the Environmental Protection Agency. We received a complaint about potential pollution issues here. I carefully examined their inspection notice and realized the complainant was Marcus Thorne, one of the former shareholders of Evergreen Environmental. This was the man who had kicked me when I was down during the bankruptcy, buying up many of our patents for pennies on the dollar. "Officer, all of our permits are in order," I said, pulling out a folder of documents. "Here's our business license, our environmental impact report." The officials reviewed them and confirmed everything was in order. However, they still required us to halt the operation of some equipment pending further tests. "Eleanor, long time no see," a familiar voice called from behind me. I turned to see Marcus Thorne, whom I hadn't seen in 20 years. He was heavier than I remembered, dressed in an expensive suit, a gold watch glittering on his wrist. "Marcus, what is the meaning of this?" I asked coldly. He put on a fake smile. "I heard my old colleague was making a comeback, so I came to show my support." His eyes scanned Julian and Victoria. "And who are these two?" "My son and daughter-in-law," I answered curtly. "Ah," Marcus said in a drawn-out, mocking tone. "I heard you're reviving Professor Chen's old project." He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Eleanor, be smart. Sell the technology to me. We can negotiate a good price." I finally understood his motive. He must have heard about our progress and wanted to pull the same stunt again. "Marcus," I looked him straight in the eye. 20 years ago, you took advantage of my situation to buy my company's assets for nothing. You won't get away with it again." Marcus's face darkened. "Eleanor, don't be ungrateful. Do you really think the few of you can accomplish anything?" He gestured toward the humble recycling depot. "Look at this dump. What do you have to fight me with?" Julian suddenly stepped forward. "Mr. Thorne, I'll ask you to be respectful. This place is my mother's life's work." Marcus looked Julian up and down dismissively. "Kid, did your mother not tell you how she knelt and begged me to buy those patents?" My fists clenched, but Julian's reaction surprised me. "Mr. Thorne," his voice was incredibly calm, "we can't change the past. But the future," he pointed to the lab behind us, "will be built with our own hands." Marcus sneered. "We'll see about that," he said, turning to leave. The EPA officials eventually confirmed that our operations were fully compliant, but the incident was a wake-up call. "Mom, Marcus Thorne won't give up," Julian said, worried. I nodded. "He was always obsessed with your father's research. Now that he knows we're close to a breakthrough, he'll stop at nothing." Victoria suddenly spoke up. "We need to expedite the patent application." Robert agreed. "Yes. And we need to diversify our protection, the formula, the process, the equipment, all of it." The days that followed were a mad dash. Julian led the technical team, working around the clock. Victoria handled the legal and business affairs, and I coordinated all our resources. A month later, our first official product line was launched. The test results were even better than expected, 40% cheaper than similar products on the market, with 20% higher performance. At the signing ceremony for our first major contract, many reporters were present. When a journalist asked about our startup story, Julian took my hand and Victoria's and said, "This is the result of our whole family's effort, especially my mother. Without her 20 years of unwavering perseverance, today's breakthrough would not have been possible." In the flash of the cameras, I saw tears glistening in Victoria's eyes. This girl, who once despised me for collecting scrap, now stood proudly by my side, introducing our environmental cause to the world. However, just as we were preparing to scale up production, a new problem arose. Our raw material supply was suddenly cut off. Several recycling centers we had contracts with broke them at the same time. "It's Marcus Thorne's doing," Victoria said angrily. "He's buying up all the scrap plastic in the area at a premium and threatening suppliers not to work with us." Robert was worried. "Without raw materials, the production line will have to stop." Julian thought for a moment, his eyes suddenly lighting up. "Mom, do you remember the places you used to take me to collect scrap when I was a kid?" I immediately understood what he meant. "You're saying—" "Exactly," Julian said excitedly. "We can build our own collection network, directly from communities, schools, and factories." Victoria got excited too. "That way, we not only secure our supply but also cut out the middleman, further reducing costs." We got to work immediately. The next day, we split into teams and started visiting communities across the city. I took the veteran employees to the older neighborhoods, while Julian and Victoria focused on newly developed residential areas. It wasn't easy at first. Many property management companies were uninterested, and some outright refused. But Julian and Victoria didn't give up. They designed detailed recycling plans with incentive programs and finally won over a few large communities. What moved me the most was seeing Victoria completely shed her heiress persona. She wore a work uniform and went door to door, explaining the importance of sorting waste and even personally teaching residents how to do it correctly. "Ma'am, look." One evening, she excitedly showed me a photo on her phone. The residents of the Sunshine community organized their own recycling drive today. Even the kids participated. In the photo, a group of children were gathered around Victoria, holding up sorted recyclables, their faces beaming. Meanwhile, Julian launched a Green Campus initiative at the university, calling on students and faculty to participate in recycling. When his students learned it was their professor's family business, many volunteered to help. A month later, not only had we solved our raw material crisis, but we had also built a citywide collection network. Marcus Thorne's blockade had completely failed. At the celebration dinner, Robert raised his glass. "Eleanor, honestly, when I first agreed to Victoria and Julian's marriage, I was impressed by Julian's education and potential." He looked at his daughter. "I never imagined it would be our family who ended up marrying up." Victoria blushed and cut her father off. "Dad, what are you talking about?" I smiled to ease the tension. "Robert, you're being too modest. We're one family now, there's no distinction." Just then, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Miss Vance? This is Sarah Jenkins from the Environmental Industry Fund. We are very interested in your company's technology and would like to discuss a potential investment." That phone call marked the beginning of a new chapter. With the help of professional investors, we rapidly expanded our production scale, and our products were in high demand. Seeing that his pressure tactics had failed, Marcus Thorne actually sent someone to discuss an acquisition, offering 10 times what he had paid for the patents years ago. Some on the board were tempted, but Julian was firm. "This isn't about money. This technology was my father's life's work. It has to be used for the right purpose." In the end, we rejected the acquisition, but agreed to license the technology, on the condition that Marcus's company adhere to our strict environmental standards. On the day of the licensing agreement signing, Marcus said with a wry smile, "Eleanor, I have to admit, you won." He looked at Julian. "Your son has more guts than you did back in the day." I didn't respond, just calmly signed my name on the contract. True victory isn't about defeating an opponent. It's about staying true to your beliefs and passing them on to the next generation. That evening, when we got home, Julian told me he had a surprise. He led me to the study and opened his laptop. "Mom, look." On the screen was a blueprint for a modern environmental industrial park. At its center stood a statue, the silhouette of my husband. "This is our new headquarters," Julian said, his voice full of pride. "Construction has already begun. It will have a research center, an educational facility, and a model production line." He pointed to a corner of the blueprint. "And this? This is a scrap art gallery, designed especially for you." Tears streamed down my face. This boy, who was once ashamed to admit his mother collected scrap, now wanted to build a gallery to commemorate that journey. "Mom, I have an idea," Julian said softly. "When the park is finished, I want to display all those treasures you've collected over the years. Every piece of scrap has a story of perseverance and hope behind it." I hugged my son tightly, unable to speak. In that moment, I felt as if my husband were smiling down from heaven. The legacy he left his child wasn't wealth, but a heart that could find and create value. When spring arrived, our new industrial park held its groundbreaking ceremony. The mayor himself attended, and the media flocked to cover the environmental miracle that rose from a scrap heap. I was invited to give a speech. Standing at the microphone, looking at the familiar faces in the crowd, Julian, Victoria, Robert, Larry, Mike, my voice choked with emotion. 20 years ago, when my husband and I founded Evergreen Environmental, our dream was to make the world a cleaner place. After the company went bankrupt, I survived by collecting scrap, but I never gave up on that dream. In the audience, Julian's eyes were red as he held Victoria's hand tightly. Some people said I went from a CEO to a scrap lady, but I never saw it as a fall, I continued. Because every piece of scrap has the potential to become a treasure, and every person deserves to be treated with respect. The applause was thunderous. I looked at the outline of my husband's statue, and it was as if he were gently nodding. After the ceremony, an old, white-haired man approached me. "Eleanor, do you remember me?" I looked closely and suddenly recognized him. "Professor Davis, you were my husband's mentor." Professor Davis smiled and nodded. Julian contacted me and invited me to be a technical consultant. He looked at the park plans with emotion. If Professor Chen knew his research was finally being realized, he would be so happy. Just then, Julian and Victoria walked over with a surprise. In their hands was an ultrasound photo. "Mom, you're going to be a grandmother," Julian announced excitedly. The blurry little dot on the photo looked like a newly sprouted seed. I took the photo with trembling hands, my vision blurred by tears. Victoria gently hugged me. "Ma'am, Julian and I have talked about it. If it's a boy, his name will be Nathan Cole Chen. If it's a girl, her name will be Nora Eleanor Chen. Cole for Dad," Julian explained, "and Eleanor for Mom." I could no longer hold back, and I hugged them both, sobbing. In that moment, all the years of hardship melted into tears of joy. That night, we held a simple celebration dinner at the old house. Victoria insisted on cooking. Although her skills were still developing, the slightly burnt stir-fried vegetables were the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. After dinner, Julian brought out the photo album he had treasured for years. We went through it page by page, reminiscing. There were photos of him as a child playing in piles of scrap, his proud expression the first time he won an award, and a photo I had secretly taken from a distance at his college graduation. "Mom, I've always wanted to ask you," Julian said, pointing to a faded photo. "We were having such a hard time back then. Why did you insist on sending me to college?" In the photo, I was standing next to a construction site, covered in dust but smiling brightly, holding Julian's university acceptance letter. "Because education is the best investment," I answered softly. "Mom could endure hardship, but I couldn't let you lose the chance to change your destiny." Victoria started to tear up. "Ma'am, I was so thoughtless before." I patted her hand. "Silly girl, that's all in the past. Look at you now, starting from the bottom and proving yourself every day." Robert raised his glass, to our family's new beginning. In the clear clinking of glasses, I felt like I could hear the gears of fate turning. A 20-year cycle, from CEO to scrap collector, and now to this rebirth. The road was difficult, but it was worth it. Late that night, after our guests had left, I stood alone on the balcony. Julian came over and draped a jacket over my shoulders. "Mom, don't catch a cold." "Julian," I said, looking at the stars. "I am so proud of you. Mom, I'm the one who should be saying that." His voice was thick with emotion. "You spent 20 years teaching me the most important lesson in life. Dignity isn't about your position, but about how you face your circumstances." I turned and looked at my son's mature face, suddenly realizing how much he looked like his father. "Oh, by the way, Mom," Julian said, as if suddenly remembering something. "Victoria and I have a favor to ask you." "What is it?" "When the baby is born," he said, a little shyly, "can you tell him a story about a piece of scrap every day? Just like you used to tell me." I smiled and nodded, though tears welled up in my eyes again. The things others saw as trash had become the thread that tied our family together, connecting the past and the future, carrying memories and hope. The next morning, I woke up early as usual, ready to head to the depot. But when I opened the door, I found Julian and Victoria, dressed and ready, waiting for me. "Mom, we'll go with you," Julian said. "Ma'am, I want to learn how to operate the forklift today," Victoria said excitedly. In the morning light, our three shadows stretched long on the ground, intertwining, inseparable. Just like our destinies, which, after separation and misunderstanding, were finally and tightly bound together, heading toward a new beginning.